Sinai, and these are some of the things that I'm going to cover. Actually cover a little bit more than that. And I actually went to probably twice as much as up there. So I really had to cut this down and condense it to mainly hit the high points. So there was quite a bit more. If you invite me into your home and give me dinner, I'll go through the whole trip with you, spend the night, whatever, because that's about how long it would take. All right. So the main reason for this trip, so I'm going to back up a little bit. The main reason for this trip is in June, last just about a year ago, in 2023, Sue and I did a tour with a group from the Naz Church that was Israel and Egypt. It was 10 days in Israel and 5 days in Egypt. And it was a great trip, except for what I was going for was to see the actual sites, where Jesus was born, where Jesus was crucified, where Jesus did this or that. And the disappointing part is that for a lot of these sites, they don't know where Jesus did this. I mean, they have shrines and churches and gift shops that are dedicated to all these miracles that Jesus did, like the feeding of the 5,000. Well, how are you going to know where? They just picked some mountain and said, this is where he fed the 5,000. The Sermon on the Mount. Where did he preach the Sermon on the Mount? Where was the wedding in Cana? My favorite is where did the angel announce to Mary that she was going to have our Savior? Yeah, we know where that is. Not. So they have all these shrines dedicated to these places that I'm sure they don't have the foggiest idea where it happened. They probably picked some vacant lot and said, okay, that's where he fed the 5,000. But they don't know. And really, the most frustrating one for me was Mount Sinai. They have it out in the middle of the Sinai Peninsula. And I'm going to show you a few video clips from that, but I was just so upset or so disappointed by that part of the trip because I just said, there is no way this is the real Mount Sinai. It just can't be. There's nothing. The stuff is not lining up with the Bible. So let me give you the overview.
Okay, folks, we are at the traditional site of Mount Sinai, and probably the reason why I am here today is because after seeing this, I just said, there's no way this is Mount Sinai. Too many things are wrong with the site, and as Andrew will explain, and so I began to investigate where the real Mount Sinai was, found out this is probably not it. So, more to come.
So, I did do some investigation when I got home and saw a lot of YouTube clips and a lot of articles, and this trip is based on what I found, that I think I did find the right place. The right place is, okay? So that's kind of, but this is more on, this is Andrew, our tour guide.
So we right now are at St. Catherine's Monastery. This is the traditional Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, which is owned by Egypt. And in ancient times, while the country of Egypt was mainly around the Nile Delta, the Nile River, the Sinai Peninsula was controlled by the ancient Egyptians. They had mines where they mined different type of minerals and rocks and metals in the Sinai Peninsula. And this area is served at Al-Qaeda and at Timnah. And so they controlled the Sinai Peninsula. They had forts along the way of Horus, or the way of the Philistines, that went from Egypt to the Promised Land in Canaan. And so that's why the Israelites did not take, it says in the book of Exodus in chapter 13 and 14, that God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, which is the way of Horus. The Greeks later call it Via Mara, the way of the sea. And it followed the coast, but they had a lot of Egyptian forts there. And so God took them out the other way. And the other way is where we were driving close to. It's near Lake Timsah in Ismailia, and it's a central route out. And across the Sinai Peninsula, it was the trade route between Egypt and Midian in the Arabian Peninsula. And so they took that central trade route out to go to Midian, which everyone agrees is in northwest Saudi Arabia. This is the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Gulf of Suez, the Bitter Lakes, and you can see the Suez Canal going through there. And so the reason why a lot of people have been focused on this mountain is because it's the traditional mountain. So why would they disagree with tradition? But in regards to the archaeological evidence, there's nothing here. It's a town now, but there's zero archaeological evidence that the Israelites were here at any time. Now, how far back does the tradition go? It goes back to the 300s, about basically.
Helena,
Yeah, and then we had Saint Helena, who was Constantine's mother. She was going around trying to find these pilgrim sites. They had just opened up basically the route to the Holy Land, and the Roman Empire just became Christian, so people wanted to go see the sites in the Bible. And so she had a vision and believed that this was it. There was some monks living in this area. But other than that, there was zero evidence from the Bible or history or archaeology that the Israelites are down in this remote area we were at right now. Now, in regard to the Red Sea crossing, we looked at...
Okay, so I don't know if you caught that, but Mount Sinai was the result of the Emperor Constantine. He's the Roman emperor, became a Christian, and then the whole Roman Empire became Christian. So instead of being persecuted, now you had to be a Christian if you were a Roman citizen. But he said, okay, let's find out where all these places are in the Bible. So he sent his mother on a mission, and his mother began to identify all these sites, and then she'd put a Greek Orthodox church, a Byzantine church, in those spots so that pilgrims could visit that site. And not soon after, they added gift shops, I'm sure. So every holy site has a gift shop. But she ran into problems when it was time for Mount Sinai, because there was nobody had a clue where Mount Sinai was. If they would have read the Bible, they might have had a clue, but they didn't. So she had a vision that it was on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this peninsula. And so she said, okay, we're going to put a Byzantine church here, and there's a Byzantine monastery that's been there ever since. It's the oldest active Byzantine monastery, Greek Orthodox, same thing, that's in existence. But there was nothing to suggest, like where Jesus was crucified, where Jesus was born, they at least had a starting point where there were traditions that were already established. But Mount Sinai was nothing. And then you say, well, it's called the Sinai Peninsula, right? Who named it the Sinai Peninsula? Constantine, after his mother, said, this is Mount Sinai. So if this is Mount Sinai, this must be the Sinai Peninsula. Seriously? So, that was probably the most disappointing part of my trip, was to go to some of these places, especially Mount Sinai, and then be told this is Mount Sinai. You can just look around. It doesn't have enough, it doesn't have any water, it doesn't have any grazing land, it doesn't have enough room for 1 million or 2 million or whatever people were there. So it was and the Bible says they were there for a year. You wouldn't last 2 weeks in that place, even with manna, which they had, but it was just all wrong. So it continues.
And what we have here is the actual burning bush that God spoke to Moses. It survived over 2,500 years.
Still here.
It's also caused me to be a little skeptical.
And the well of Moses.
And here we have the well where Moses supposedly watered Zipporah's sheep, where he met Zipporah. The only problem is that was in Midian, and this is not. It's in Egypt. Midian very clearly is in Saudi Arabia, not Egypt.
So if we look at a map, the Bible talks to them about taking the way of the wilderness, which does cut across this peninsula, but this was just known as the wilderness of the Red Sea at that time. And both of these arms were known as the Red Sea. That's the Gulf of Aqaba today, but back then it was also known as the Red Sea. So Midian is here in Saudi Arabia. So to get to Midian, they'd have to cross this portion of the Red Sea. Midian they've always known that this is the land of Midian. Now, when Moses fled from Pharaoh, he fled to Midian and lived there for 40 years. So he was familiar with the area. I think he would have got the area right when God said, I want you to come back here to Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb at that time, and bring the children of Israel here. So to get to here, and Mount Sinai is there, we believe. To get to there, they'd have to cross the Red Sea. Or actually, they wouldn't have to cross the Red Sea. If you see the map, they could have just gone around and made it. Why did they cross the Red Sea? Pharaoh. So by coming this way, and when they got to this point, Etham, God said, turn south. So they turned south and followed a wadi, that's a dry riverbed, into a canyon, and then they came out on this big beach right here, and right behind them was the Egyptians who changed their mind, and so they're pursuing them. So they're trapped. They've got the Egyptians behind them, they got the Red Sea in front of them, and they got this mountain range, this huge canyon on either side of them. They were trapped, which God had planned all the time. That's why he didn't take them around. He wanted to demonstrate his power with Pharaoh. Okay, so I'll get back to that story later, but this is all based, when I was doing my research on the internet, this is all based on this one man, Ron Wyatt. He's not a professional archaeologist. He was a nurse anesthesiologist who just had an interest in the Bible and would read the Bible and say, I bet I could find that, and prayed about it and went, and so he found more than this, but these are the ones that are confirmed. In other words, after he found them, other people came and found what he found and found more to be convincing that these are the actual sites. And this was in the 70s and the 80s and 90s. He died in 1999. But he had made all these discoveries, Noah's Ark, Red Sea crossing, Mount Sinai, and Sodom, and that was where I was going to investigate, okay? So, this is the guy. This man, when he was in middle school, heard Ron Wyatt speak and became convinced that he had found these places, and so he kind of followed him the rest of his life, and now he's an adult and leading tours to all these places. So if you're interested in going to any of these places, I went to all of them, but you can actually pick just one or two or however many you want and go to them. But this is where you go, Andrew Jones at discoveredsinai.com, okay? So back up to the beginning of the trip. So I was over in Turkey, was visiting Michael there, and he lives in Izmir, which is modern-day Smyrna. But the 7 churches of Revelation are right in that area. So I thought, I've got 2 or 3 days, let's go visit those churches. So the very first part of my trip was not part of the official tour, but I just went to like 4 of these churches. I went to Smyrna, Ephesus, Laodicea, and Sardis. So this was at Ephesus, and these are the ruins of Ephesus. They have this magnificent library here. And this is under a roof, but these are like condominiums. This is like the early condominiums. So we got to see how people lived and, how their houses were and how their toilets worked or didn't work. And one of the things that was interesting was this was wallpaper. You know what that is? It's marble, solid marble. And they would cut like half-inch thick slices, put it up, and it was wallpaper for them. So these were rich people that lived in these apartments here. But it kind of gave you insight into how the rich lived back then. This is the ruins of Laodicea. This is where St. John is buried. He, of course, was the only one that wasn't martyred. He lived out the rest of his life in Ephesus, and so this was the city of Ephesus, and became well known. And then when they buried, they just did this simple marble slab right there, and that's where he's buried. This is also in Ephesus. Does anybody recognize this? It's the Temple of Diana, okay, Artemis. One of the 7 wonders of the world. So this is what it looked like in its prime. That's what's left of it today. 1 column out of 128. And both of these are in Ephesus, John's grave and the 7th wonder of the world. I just thought it was kind of poetic justice there. Which lasted, which had more permanence. Although it's simple, it's been there ever since 100 AD. So, kind of interesting. All right, so I also went to 2 other cities. Don't want to bore you with that. Then we were on to Noah's Ark, which is in the area of Ararat, the mountain of Ararat. In fact, that's Mount Ararat in the background. I thought the sheep in front looked pretty cool. Only to find out the ark is not on Ararat, okay? So the scriptures say that the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, not the mountain of Ararat, the mountains. So actually, all the mountains in the area around Ararat are called the mountains of Ararat. So come to find out, it's not on Ararat, and Andrew will explain why. It's on one of the mountains in that range of Ararat. So here's why it's not on Mount Ararat.
Okay, we're still standing on the back or northern rounded end of the Durupanar Noah's Ark site. But I want to point out, you can see in the background the beautiful mountain of Mount Ararat and then Lesser Ararat over there. Now these are stratovolcano cones. Now stratovolcanoes are also known as composite volcanoes. And this is a type of volcano that forms a mountain by multiple eruptions. And they build on each other, these layers or composite layers, and it usually has a cone shape. So Mount Fuji is one, Rainier in Washington State, Mount St. Helens is another, and Mount Ararat. So a lot of people have looked for the ark up there because they assumed, oh, it's named Mount Ararat, so the Bible says the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. Now, technically, Mount Ararat is in the mountains of Ararat, just like we are here, but this is for sure a post or after the flood mountain that was created. So it wasn't even around for Noah to land the ark on. And we know that is because the plain, or that basin you see down there, is made up of flood deposits laid down by the global flood. And then on top of that, the mountain was formed. So after the flood had laid everything down, all these sedimentary layers, and they have core drilled down there, so we know that. And then the mountain erupted and formed this cone-shaped mountain we call today Mount Ararat. So since the ark had no mountain there to land on, the people who claim they've seen an ark up there are making up stories, hate to say it, or they saw a rock shape that looked like something and they assumed it's the ark. But there's been no actual remains of a boat up there found, just different conflicting eyewitness accounts.
So I don't know if you caught that, but when the ark came over that area, there was no Mount Ararat. It's a volcano that's built up with layers, and when the waters were there, there was no mountain there. It came later. So the ark cannot be on Mount Ararat. The Turkish government did set aside the land, and you'll see the site, and called it Noah's Ark National Park. So there's a national park there where the ark really is. And they have a visitor center there. And this next clip is taking, gift shop. No, they don't have a gift shop yet.
Hey, welcome guys. We are here at the Noah's Ark Visitor Center. Come on in, I'll show you around. The first thing you'll notice, we have these big posters that explains the history of Noah's Ark, how the site was discovered by Captain Ilhan Durupanar in 1959. Because they took these military photographs from high altitude that showed this boat formation, this boat shape right here, and it got the world excited. By 1960, we had Ara Güler, who was a famous Turkish photographer. He rented a small plane, and they flew over the site, and you can see this really nice boat shape that's sitting out there in the mud flow. Now, if you follow me over here, I'm going to show you some of the things on why we believe this to be Noah's Ark. So the first thing is, we are in the mountains of Ararat. Now, a lot of people think that the Bible says the ark landed on the big volcano Ararat. No, it says mountains, plural, in the book of Genesis. And that's the kingdom of Urartu, which is right here. And this red dot is where we're at. So we're in the middle of this mountainous kingdom, kind of like saying the ark landed in the Rocky Mountains. So that's the first key. We're in the right location. Next, you have this boat shape. In fact, when the photogrammetry expert from Ohio State University saw this, he said that this is not natural. You can't get this type of shape in nature. So you have a boat shape, and it fits Noah's Ark. Now, some people believe the ark has to be a barge or a rectangular shaped object, and that's not what the ark means. The ark, the description talks about the functionality of holding the animals and the people through the flood, not the shape of the hull. So we believe that this boat shape fits perfectly an ancient boat that's been decaying. The other thing is it matches the size in the Bible. So we're talking about 300 royal Egyptian cubits. You know, the book of Acts says Moses was educated in Egypt. He was the prince of Egypt. And so the royal Egyptian cubit was the standard of measurement used back in that time, just like meters are today. And so this object is 515 feet long, exactly 300 royal Egyptian cubits, just what Moses wrote in the book of Genesis. And there's been different little artifacts found on the site. Back in 1991, Ron Wyatt, who did most of the research on this site in the 80s and 90s, his tour group found this fossilized rivet that has different alloys and metals in it. Very fascinating. And as you follow me to the last panel we have here, this will show you some of the underground things that have been discovered at this site. So this is the geophysical surveys. Now, the site has not been excavated. So this site, the only way we can see below the ground is using different types of technologies like GPR, which is radar, or ERT, which uses electrical resistivity to determine the shapes and size of objects below the ground. And so you can see some of the original GPR, the analog printout by Ron Wyatt and David Fasold, done in 1985. And then over here, you can see some of our, the ones we did in 2019. And this was digital, so a little more high tech. But they both, all of these radar surveys show that there are angular shapes and patterns below the ground. You can see here the reflections. And the guy, he was the vice president of the manufacturer for this GPR unit. And he said, these patterns are too regular. You do not find this in nature. And the archaeologist who examined our 2019 data, he said this is the best place if he were to do an excavation, he would do it right in this area, because he said you find these angular structures about 7 meters down, about 20 feet below the surface. And over here, we were finding linear patterns about 3 meters or 9 feet below the surface. So by looking into this object, we're seeing that it's just not a natural random rubble of mud and rock. You actually see other things that suggest it's a man-made object below the ground. And so we believe this is the buried remains of Noah's Ark.
So this is what it looks like. I'll show you a present picture, but it was snow covered, so it was hard to see it. So I want you to see a clear outline of what it looks like. But it has these upraised sides on both sides of it, and then it is boat-shaped, but it's all covered with mud. In fact, I have some mud or dirt here from that I kind of chiseled out, and then I realized I'm not supposed to do that, because you're not supposed to dig. One group came and was starting to dig, actually do their own excavation, and they got thrown out for doing that. But so the Turkish government has just this year given permission to start excavating. And they said you have to have 2 Turkish universities, and they allowed 1 American university. And this summer is they're going to start doing their plans and taking their pictures. We don't think they're going to start digging right away, because they're going to do their own maps and kind of plan out, organize where they're going to dig and how they're going to. But they've already made plans to start digging, so they're convinced that there's something there. All right, so this is what I saw. Again, there's snow on the ground, but you can see the outline of the ark there. It's absolutely huge. You can say it's 516 feet from bow to stern. But there's the outline. I mean, it's kind of camouflaged by the snow. So I mean, you can walk down to it, and like you can see the ribs of the side that are uprised. So that's where I would start digging. Okay, so this is me at the bottom, kind of give you scale of size. This is at the bottom edge, and then these are the uprise sides on both sides. And it's all mud. Basically, they believe that a mud flow carried the ark from a higher location down to this location and kind of built up. So it's just covered with mud right now. That's me up near the top. I was ready for desert weather. I was not ready for 40 degrees with wind chill of 20. So I was freezing. And this is the looking down from the top, and you can kind of see the uprise size there on the side. So, I mean, it's huge. It's a huge boat. And that was a convincer for me. This is one of the scans that they did, an ERT, electro-resistance tomography, where they can bounce electrical impulses off, and anything that's not rock is going to show up in blue. So what shows up? A boat, a big boat. So when I saw that, I went, this has got to be it. There's no way it can't be. So these are some of the tests that were done. This is what Ron Wyatt did first. He just measured, and you can see these are like the beams that are running across. And those are not natural formations. So when they were dedicating this area as a national park, probably just to appease Christians, or maybe set up a tourist area, I don't know, because they didn't really believe him. The governor saw one of these that was close to the surface. The scan said is only like 3 foot down, and he said, dig. He says, what's there? Go see what's there. And they dug, and they pulled up this beam. Well, they won't call it a beam. They'll call it fossilized organic matter. It's wood, okay? And it's an actual beam from the ark. It's fossilized organic matter officially, though. All right, so this is another scan that they did, and you can see the shape of the ark there. Superimposed are these parallel and perpendicular lines, i.e. rooms. So if you were to dig down there, you would probably hit fossilized wood in the shape of actual rooms. Another scan. This one was done, I think, in 2019. But again, you see what looks to be parallel and perpendicular lines. You don't get that in nature, or not much. And another room right here, hallway. And, I mean, there's the outline of the ark, so you dig down maybe 20 feet, and that's what you're going to hit. So I'm thinking that in the next couple of years, you're going to see some headlines that say, we've discovered the ark. Well, it's been discovered since the 80s. But all right, and this was the most recent scan that was done. Red is a hollow spot. It's where there's no dirt, there's no nothing. So there's the shape of the ark. Right down the middle is a hollow hallway, so that if you were to dig down, you would actually be able to walk in a hallway. Well, what's a hallway doing 21 feet down? And this shows up at every level. I mean, every level you do a scan, that shows up in the middle, so that's probably an atrium, like a centralized atrium, either to get air or whatever, but that goes all the way to the top, almost to the top, and it's hollow. So I think there's some interesting things down there that when they start excavating, they're going to find. All right, so that's the beam they dug up. Wait, that's the fossilized organic matter. Okay, that's a rivet, and it's made of aluminum and bronze and iron alloys that would have been known to the people, to shipbuilders during that time of Noah. I mean, it's known like the earliest shipbuilders used rivets to hold wood together. And they took a metal detector, I didn't show this scan, but they took a metal detector just across the top, and they found all these lines of metal running up and down the whole shape, and at regular intervals. So, I mean, how can it not be? It's just like, ugh. But we have to stay official until it's proven. All right, this was another interesting thing that was not mentioned in the Bible, but they found these huge stones all in a 1 mile square area that was about maybe 15, 20 miles from where the ark site is. And what was known to early maritime builders is that they would use these as anchor stones. They'd drill a hole in the middle, run a rope through, and then it was used to stabilize a large boat. So these are anchor stones that were found in a field. There's 30 of them, and the crosses that were put on them were by the Armenians, which was one of the first Christian nations to declare Christianity as their official religion. They found these, figured out what they were, and engraved crosses on them to mark them as relics of the ark so that people, would make pilgrimages to there. Probably not soon after they put a gift shop up. But they found 30 of these. And so they think what happened is that as the waters are starting to go down, they're now hitting the ground, and they're going to hinder the ark. So they cut the ropes loose and just let the anchor stones fall down. That's why they're all concentrated in one area. But, it's just odd that you have all these huge stones with this hole in it in like a 1 mile square area. So, and like I said, the government set it aside as a national park. It's Noah's Ark, but didn't quite know how to spell Noah. But it's a sign marked off the road, and there's the visitor center. So they're kind of trying to accommodate the Christians. But until just this year, they really didn't believe there was anything there. So, and Christians themselves are slow to believe that anything's there. When you see that evidence, it's like, what do you think it is? So I was convinced. Maybe I'm naive, but there's a big boat there made of fossilized organic material. All right. So, there's quite a few other sites that we visited in Turkey, some other things that relate to the Bible, but our next stop was Egypt, Cairo, Egypt. So what we were going to visit is the pyramids, the land of Goshen, and then also where we think the Red Sea crossing was. So the next part shifts to Egypt, and there's the pyramids of Giza, one of the surviving wonders of the world. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely huge. Now, Sue, you didn't go to the pyramids, did you? You saw those? I thought you were sick that day. Okay. So we saw these last year, so this was a repeat. But what I didn't know, or what we found out, is that all of the pyramids this is the only surviving exterior of the pyramids. So when they were built with limestone that looked like this. So this is one of the surviving walls inside a temple that has the same material that the pyramids were made out of. You can see there's no mortar in the joints. They're just perfectly fitted and pressed together. So the math was incredible. And then this gives you the scale of size. That's me next to one of the blocks. I think each block weighs like anywhere from 10 to 16 tons just for a single block. But what happened is that after over the years, the Egyptians saw this material and said, "That'd look great in my house. It'd be good to have a house built to that." And so they basically looted all of the pyramids. They just took the outside coverings, they chiseled away and used it in their house. So all the pyramids have the exterior removed, and then what you see are these blocks like this. That's all that's left from what was looted, until finally a pharaoh or a president or somebody said, "Enough, quit looting the pyramids." And so they stopped it, but not before they got most of the building material for their homes. Another interesting fact I found out was by using the Bible and an Egyptian historian, they were able to figure out who the pharaoh was of the Exodus, and his name was Amenhotep, and his mummy's preserved. Actually, most of the mummies of the pharaohs are preserved because the priests, when all this looting was going on, the priests wanted to save the mummies because that was what their ticket to eternal life was. So they went around to all these tombs and gathered up all the mummies, and they stored them in a big storehouse. It was probably like, the Indiana Jones ending where the warehouse is just, they stored they got all the mummies, stored them in this house, and then they finally, just a couple years ago, built a museum and put them in the museum. And so now you can see any mummy from any area. So why do we think that this was? All right, so one of the things that this tour did is just kind of reinforce my faith in the accuracy of the Bible. It says we walk by faith, not by sight, and that's true, but boy, sight is really cool. When you see these things that the Bible talks about and see how accurate it is, That's amazing. So in 1 Kings 6:1, it says, in the 480th year, after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, he began to build the temple of the Lord. Okay, we know when Solomon's reign began, and in the 4th year, that would have been at 966 BC. So there's a very specific date that we know of, because Solomon documented stuff well, so we know when the 4th year of his reign is. Now, if we go 480 years after, or actually before that, add 480 to 966, it takes you right to 1446 BC. It gives you an exact year, if we believe that the Bible is true. So, one of the early Egyptian historians by the name of Manetho names this pharaoh, Amenhotep, as the one Moses escaped from. I mean, he's specific, and he wrote this in like the 3rd century BC. So he was kind of documenting, he was kind of like Josephus. He was documenting important events in history, and he mentioned, one of the few, because the Egyptians were embarrassed about it, that Amenhotep was the one that Moses escaped from. And what's really interesting to me is that his eldest son did not succeed him. With the pharaohs, it's always the eldest son that succeeds them. This one, his second eldest son succeeded him because the first one died mysteriously. Wonder how that happened. Read your Bible. So a lot of these things fit in place. And so just using the Bible and the math of the Bible, and then what other historians have said, that puts you right at 1446 BC would be right during this reign, 1450 to 1423. So it puts him right during that reign. So this little side note, we figured out who the pharaoh was. Although everything's controversial. So people will find other facts that'll dispute it, and they'll give them something to argue about. But this was what I think the Bible says. There's the, oops, go back. Wrong button. So the Sphinx, we visited that, and I went on a camel ride. I didn't go the first time because I thought it was stupid. But then I looked at it and that'd be kind of cool to do that, just to get on that thing. So there's this is the traffic in Cairo, which you've heard about is the worst in the world. That's true. So I just did like a 30-second clip here. And people just walking across anytime they feel like it, cars, trying not to hit them, motorcycles darting in and out wherever they feel like it, more people crossing whenever they feel like it.
On the highway, they just start the cars.
Because the people, they drop off in the minibus above this bridge, and they use the stairs, they're coming to catch another
car coming across, people coming across.
Because this is big parking. So if you wanted to go to anywhere to catch the transportation from there. If you want to go to Alexandria, October City.
Everybody just drifting to wherever they find a spot.
How long is the drive from here to Alexandria?
Around 3 hours.
And this was just a little side road. This wasn't the main road. Truck trying to squeeze in. Oop, doesn't make it. Stops. Motorcycle
It's supposed to be this way. It's named Kardasa. If you would like to eat
Watch this
camel.
man.
Oh, camel.
He just cuts them right off.
Fresh camel.
Fresh camel.
Liver camel.
Oh, the one they rode.
Yes.
Passing on the back road. All right, so that's just a little idea of what it's like to drive in Cairo. This is me getting on my camel.
And we're up.
They don't like it.
Quit complaining.
So that's me in the front, and the one taking the picture is Yolanda. We only had 2 people on the tour besides myself for this part. For Noah's Ark, we only had 1. So it was, I had my own private tour, practically. So you can take a camel ride out to the pyramids and back. It's like $10.
I got my camera back. I got it. I'm videotaping. I am videotaping.
Of course, the vendors will do anything to get you to buy their product. And what the vendors at the pyramids would do is say, free camel ride. Come on, free, get on. And so the people that would get on, after the camel ride, they'd say, okay, now it's $10 to get off. You said it was free. It is free. But if you want to get off, it's $10. So I paid the $10 up front.
It's pretty hot out here today. It's beautiful.
So there's the pyramids in the distance. It was kind of cool, although you paid for it later. Bow-legged for like 2 days. Okay, so that finished up our pyramid part. Then we went to the land of Goshen, which is where the Israelites lived until they left. And it was rich farmland. It was probably the best farmland because it was all irrigated. The problem with it is that it's a very remote, or sort of remote, rural area. And in Egypt, I don't know if you remember the Arab Spring. When the Muslim Brotherhood took over, they were voted in, and then people found out that they were really a terrorist group. So the Egyptian army staged a coup, overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood, and established their, quote, regular government. But the Muslim Brotherhood didn't appreciate that, and so they're basically with the same group as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda. They're all different names for the same thing. They all want to bring in Sharia law and a caliphate. And so when Egypt found out that's what they wanted to do, that's when they held a coup and threw them. But they're still active, and they still like to kidnap people for money. That's how they make their money. So if you're going to go in a remote area, you need to have your own security. So this was the guy that rode in the front seat, and right underneath his suit is a submachine gun, fully automatic, so that wouldn't be sub. And he rode in the front seat. Leading us was a motorcycle policeman, and following us was a car with 3 or 4 other policemen. So we actually had more police than we had people on the tour. So, but I mean, that was the only time I just felt like, a little queasy about it, because the State Department ranks areas gives travel advisories, and from like 1 to 4, and this is a level 4 area, which is the same as Gaza. So Gaza, land of Goshen, same security risk. So that's why they require their security to go with you. But that was really the only time I just felt a little uneasy. And everything went well. Okay, you just see odd sights. This was a truck transporting camels on the highway. It's like, okay, couldn't make them walk. All right, so where did the Red Sea crossing take place? This is the map that I'm using, or that we saw before. So if the land of Midian is here, and God told Moses to take them to Midian, and he wanted to eliminate Pharaoh, he'd have to cross he parted the Red Sea, and then he said the Red Sea consumed them. So it's got to be somewhere around here, because to get to here, through the Red Sea, it's got to be someplace the Gulf of Aqaba, all right? Now, modern archaeologists or scholars still, when we were there last year, they still are holding that the crossing was up here, Bitter Lakes or the Sea of Reeds. These are shallow lakes, so there couldn't be a wall of water. There couldn't be mountains on either side like the Bible says. So it can't be there. Oh, and the theory is that it was muddy, and the chariots got bogged down in the mud, and so the Israelites were able to overcome them because they couldn't fight because their chariot wheels were bogged down in the mud. That's not what the Bible says, okay? So just take a lot of these modern theories with a grain of salt, especially if they contradict what the Bible says, and a lot of it does. So anyways, the Bible does say that they took the way of the wilderness, turned south through a wadi, and then it was at this point. So let's take a look at that area. So if you look at it from a topographical area or map, and I'll start down at the bottom. One of the theories is that they crossed at this point, but here's what the topography looks like. And at this point, you're in trouble. I mean, you're going to have to rappel down cliffs to get past this spot. This has a nice gentle slope down, and then we've got cliffs that you'd have to climb up with carts and livestock and children. Okay, you're not going to make that. This one is another popular spot. Again, gradual slope down and boom, cliffs. Okay? However, at Nueva Beach, there is a gradual coming down and a gradual coming back up. It's almost like there is a land bridge. So you have a nice wide beach here where they could have fit all 1 million, 2 million people. And then this is a wadi, which is a dried out spot that they could have walked down from the way of the wilderness, just followed this path. It's wide enough and come out here. The Egyptians would have come in from behind and trapped them. Where are they going to go? They can't go through the mountains, go all the way down to the water. So they're basically trapped. And that's why they were crying out to God, why did you bring us out here to die? And that's when Moses parted the waters, struck the waters. So this is what it looks like if you were to remove the water. So there's just like in this one area, there's just like a land bridge that goes across that it's flat, easy traveling. And it's the only place in the Gulf of Aqaba where that crossing would have been possible. And this is what the wadi looks like. So it's a wide area, dry riverbed that the children of Israel would have been able to walk on flat land, and it goes out into a wide beach area. So there's a better picture or a drawing of what it would have looked like. So you got the beach there and the water, but I mean, you're not going anywhere sideways. So you're basically trapped in there. Okay, so there's the beach area today. Now, if you take those houses away, you got a huge spot that you could easily put 1 million to 2 million people there. And then God bottled up, okay, there's the opening to the wadi right there, and there's more of the beach. So God put his pillar of fire there, it said, during the night, and kept the Egyptians from coming and slaughtering them. Meanwhile, he's drying up the land and making the walls of water during the night. And so when the morning came, children of Israel walked across, Egyptians followed them, walls of water came down, end of Pharaoh and army, end of threat. So what's interesting is that when Ron Wyatt was exploring this area, he found this pillar that was upright on the beach. Actually, it was laying in the water at that point. But he also found one on the opposite side, the opposite shore in Saudi Arabia. And on that, it had engravings on it. And Ron's going to explain the significance of that.
We are here at Nueva, Egypt, and we're standing by this granite pillar that Ron Wyatt found in 1977. When he originally saw it with his two sons, it was down by the beach where he believed was the Red Sea crossing on the Gulf of Aqaba. And he didn't pay much attention to it. It was laying in the surf, and he pointed it out to the Israeli soldiers because at that time Israel had control of the Sinai Peninsula. And later he found out that they had erected it right here on the edge of this huge beach that he believed was the real Red Sea crossing. Now, in 1984, when he was imprisoned in Saudi Arabia, this pillar actually became really important because when the Saudis took him across the beach from Nueva on the Saudi side of the Red Sea crossing, they wanted to verify his story, so they took him by helicopter from the jail to the beach there. And when they landed, he found a column matching this one, still standing on the Saudi beach. But it had ancient archaic Hebrew writing on it. And this one, there was no writing. In fact, you can see where it's really rough. Maybe this area that was laying in the surf had eroded the writing. But anyways, on the Saudi side, he memorized that archaic Hebrew and later had it translated. And it mentioned Solomon's name, Pharaoh being killed, the land of Mizraim or Egypt, and the land of Edom, which would be over there, and plus the death of the Pharaoh. So the combination of all these words and letters, he believed believe that this was erected by Solomon or his men, and that this was in commemoration of the Red Sea crossing. As we know, Solomon's port for his ships to go to Africa was up north here by modern-day Aqaba. And so every 2 years, Solomon's ships would come down the Gulf and go all the way to Africa to bring back treasures, and they mentioned even monkeys that they brought back, and gold. And so this pillar could have been erected by Solomon's men to commemorate the Red Sea crossing.
Okay, so you probably couldn't hear all that, but basically he was saying that these were two pillars, one on each side, and the one on the Saudi side actually had engravings that said Egypt, Pharaoh, Israel, death, ancient Hebrew words that were engraved in it. What's interesting is that when Saudi reopened its border, well, he was actually there illegally, and he got put in jail, and the pillars are what got him out, because they convinced him that he really was looking for something. But today, the pillar on the Saudi side is missing. They did something to it, because that's the one that had the writing on it and the proof. But the one on the Egypt side or the Israel side is still standing, but it's eroded or corroded from the water. Anyway, so another factor that points to this being the Red Sea crossing is underwater. You have these very unusual coral formations. Now, coral normally just forms like a boulder. It has to be on something. So the coral is normally on boulders and then grows, and you have bigger boulders. But scattered around the bottom, because we got to go snorkeling there, are these rather unusual shapes. And you can, if you use your imagination, you can see that would be an upturned chariot. Right there, that coral could have formed around. And there's other shapes like that of things that are just sticking up like an axle. I mean, it just has all these really weird coral shapes there that the coral had formed on something and just left very unusual shapes that you don't find naturally, let's say. So that's some more evidence that there was probably chariot parts scattered underwater, and then coral formed on them. All right, so from there we switched to where we believe Mount Sinai is, and we lost our guide at the border because he owed a rental company some money that he didn't know about, and they didn't inform him. And so when he got to the border, they informed the government. And the government said, you got this $400 bill that you owe. We're not letting you in until you pay it. And it was the month of Ramadan, so no offices were open. Nobody was doing any work. So it took him almost a week to get that paid off and get permission to get in. He never did make it to Saudi Arabia. So he turned us over to this couple who was actually probably the leading experts on Mount Sinai in the area. They're from Australia. Pete and Lorena, they've been in the area for 20, 30 years, I don't know. But they focused in on doing research on Mount Sinai. So they took over our group, and we were now, there's more of us, because most people wanted to see Mount Sinai. And so they would join for just that part of the trip, that 5 days. So this is the gal that was with me since the beginning, and this is the one that joined in Egypt that was filming the camels. But all the rest of these just came to do Mount Sinai. And this was a pastor of a church in Italy, and this is one of the members, and this is a guy that's 5 years younger than me, and so we kind of limped together through it. This is the dean of a theological seminary in Dubai. This is interesting. That's Pete and Lorena. This is a pastor in Washington State. It was a real blessing. 2 guys from Canada, and this is the pastor's son. So we were staying in a town that was an hour and a half drive away from Mount Sinai, from the Mount Sinai location. So we had a long drive in the morning. So where's the real Mount Sinai? All right, you just read your Bible. There is a verse in Galatians that says, now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia. Where's Arabia? It's in Saudi Arabia. So when Ron Wyatt read these verses, he said, well, I'm going to start looking in Arabia. So he started flying planes around and asking local tribes and things like that. And that's where he found that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. This is Saudi Arabia, but also known as Arabia, the land of Midian, where Moses would have gone. And that's where he saw the burning bush on Mount Sinai. So it's got to be somewhere in this area. So looked around and tried to find other characteristics that match the biblical description of what took place at Mount Sinai. So that's basically what we're going to go through. All right, the first thing is that the local Bedouin tribes knew where Mount Sinai is because they've known it for centuries. They call this is Mount Sinai. That's what it looks like. They call it the Mountain of Moses. It's Jubal Musa, which is the Mountain of Moses. So they've known it and called it that for centuries. The Saudi Arabia, or a country there, this is also what it looks like. It's actually 3 different peaks, okay? They call it Jabal Makla, which means the burned mountain. What's interesting about this is that the top 1/4 is all black. Okay, let's go back to and that's what, most of the rock is like this, and then all this is black. Interesting. And this is kind of like the full, or part of there's like 3 different peaks, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There are 3 different peaks, and they're all burnt. They have like a burnt top like that. Now, there's a natural explanation for it, but I believe there's also a supernatural explanation, and we'll go through that. But, so this is the spot where we believe Mount Sinai is. Right at the base of it, or right away from the base of it, there's this huge plain where the Israelites would have camped out. And there's enough space for 1 million to 2 million people in this area. There's also something else that's lacking at the traditional site, is green stuff, food for the sheep, the flocks. There's enough food there. It's desert, but there's food growing for the sheep that they eat that wasn't at the traditional Mount Sinai. And in fact, they still graze sheep. That's a flock of sheep out there grazing at the base. There had to be a source of water, and this is a huge wadi at the base. This is the base of Mount Sinai. There's a wadi where a lot of water flowed at one time, and God it came right down the mountain. Could have been they were there for a year. So, and you can see that originally Saudis didn't want anybody in here, and so they put this fence all around Mount Sinai, and it kind of blew down. And Saudi Arabia got a new prince, the ones that Americans don't like. But he's trying to modernize Saudi Arabia, and so he wants to open it up for tourism. So he basically told the Saudis, don't fix the fence. So you can just walk right over the fence and go to Mount Sinai. But where you start out is a large riverbed, basically, so that would have provided water. God provided manna. Nearby is what we believe is the golden calf altar. There's this huge natural rock outcropping with almost a perfectly flat top, where Aaron could have done the golden calf. What makes us think that that's the golden calf altar? The petroglyphs that are engraved in it of cows, and they're like basically Egyptian symbols for cows and the worship of cows. So you've got that engraved all the way around. So if you take an aerial view, you see these rock walls that form animal pens or corrals, and that would have been a perfect place to keep the animals for sacrifice. At the very end is like a burn pit where they found bone and ash, so there was an altar there. So Moses made sacrifices to the Lord, or the priest did, and this is where they kept them, and this is at the base of Mount, I'm going to just call it Mount Sinai rather than the proposed Mount Sinai, because to me it's obvious, but it's not official yet. That's what the walls are made of, is rocks that were stacked up. There is also, on the other side of Mount Sinai and a mountain away, is a massive graveyard. And if you remember when they worshiped the golden calf, that the Levites went through and slew 3,000, and then God sent a plague and wiped out another 20,000. So there's got to be a place nearby that has 23,000 graves. And there is a place nearby where there's a massive graveyard. And this is one of the headstones. Most of them don't have headstones. But there's a graveyard nearby. So, I mean, you combine all that, and you're left with the conclusion this is more than likely Mount Sinai, just from all the evidence that's there. It also talked about how Moses constructed 12 pillars, one each for each tribe of Israel. Down at the bottom, near those animal pens, we find remains of pillars. And there's a marble quarry up at the top of near the top of Mount Sinai, so you could have quarried it and just rolled it down the mountain. So there's these pillars. It says that when Elijah fled Jezebel, where did he go to? He went to Mount Sinai. It's called the Mount of Horeb, but that's the other name for Mount Sinai. He fled to a cave at Mount Sinai. Guess what's halfway up the mountain? A cave. And it's the only cave in the area. More evidence. So, we'll start with what we call Elijah's cave. Says he got up, ate and drank, and he went 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God, otherwise known as Mount Sinai. There he went into a cave and spent the night, and God appeared to him. There was thunder and lightning, but God wasn't in, and he was in the still small voice. It's that story, but this is the cave where he stayed. And that was our first climb. We were going to climb up to the cave. So, when you look up, I've got it circled in red. This is, you can see there's a small cave up there, and it's the only cave in the area. So, we were going to climb up to that spot, and that was like our practice climb, because that was just going to be 2.5 hours climbing. Mount Sinai is 4 hours climbing, and you got to go down after you go up, so you double the time. All right, so we started climbing. This was the climb up to Elijah's cave. What made it hard or harder was you're climbing in loose rock like this, and every time you step down and you try to get a foothold, you're just sliding down the mountain. So I had a pole, a walking pole that came in real handy, because I would stab that thing in the rock and then give me a foothold and then climb up. But there's even spots like this where, you're just climbing straight up, just by hand. You're climbing. And there's no trails there. You just have to kind of look actually there is a trail, because donkeys will go up and graze at the top, and you just follow the donkey poo, and then you're on the trail. So we were always looking down, there, okay. And they knew which trail to take. But it was pretty steep climbing in some spots. So this is maybe about a third of the way up, and look down into where the river went. And then you get to spots like this where, even if you climb, you're not going to... So we posted our strongest guy right there, and he'd reach down and grab you and pull you up to that spot. So I'm waiting to get pulled up at this point, and I wasn't too light. So we made it up to the cave, and this is a pastor from Calvary Chapel Church in Washington State, in central Washington, and he would always bring us a Bible verse from, he read us the story of Elijah's cave and give us like a little sermon or a teaching on it. So that's what I was kind of missing from my Israel trip, is that our guide was not a Christian and didn't provide much spiritual input, but Joe was, and he had these really good teachings that went along with the site where we were at, and so that was very meaningful. That's the view from the top. So we're climbing up the front of the mountain. There's the riverbed of the river that came down the mountain. The golden calf altar is right there, and the camp for the children of Israel was down in here. So it gave you a really neat, and that little dot right there is 5 cars. That kind of shows you how far away or how far up we were for that. All right, so looking closely at the golden calf altar and then also the graveyard. Again, more signs. So this is the view from the top, this large flat rock that probably was the golden calf altar.
So I'm at the top of the golden calf altar, which is a large upraised platform that they believe that Aaron used to create the golden calf and also make sacrifices to it, because it's just a large flat platform that's upraised. People from the camp, which was out that way, could have seen it clearly. It could have been a focal point for their worship celebration. A very prominent feature in this area.
And these are the petroglyphs.
The other reason we think this is the golden calf altar is very many petroglyphs around, engraved in the rocks here, that depict worship of bulls and calves. So that's the other evidence that this is more than likely the golden calf altar.
And those were engraved all the way around. So they think that either the children of Israel did it to make a memorial, or that people came later and did it because they knew that something famous had happened there and were remembering it. So it was either the children of Israel or people that came afterwards. There's a bull. All right, nearby or on the other side of Mount Sinai is the graveyard. So
there was a couple too.
So I'm overlooking the site of what is believed to be the graveyard of the children of Israel that were caught in idolatry, and also the ones that were killed by the plague. Far enough away from the camp to be removed, but yet close enough to go ahead and bury them. What makes it appear to be a grave site, it's got many stones that are lined up in a perfect line, and some are in a rectangular portion, indicating that that's a grave. And then also at the grave sites, you see these grinding stones that they used to bury with the women. So don't think it was a battlefield, because a lot of grinding stones are here, so it means that women were buried here. They estimated it to be about 3,000 that were killed by the Levites, and another 20,000 that were killed by the plague. And even in the Muslim tradition, this is the site of a Jewish graveyard. They won't bury anyone on it because of that. Whereas off in the distance, you can see a Muslim site where Muslims are buried.
So where that fence is, that's a
left alone, and the tradition has been passed down.
They reuse
this is indeed a Jewish
a Muslim
graveyard. And you can see even some boulders that are standing up as like grave markers. So a lot of evidence that this is a Jewish burial site.
And they have dug up bone fragments in there, so there is some proof that that's a graveyard. And there's an example of how the stones are placed in parallel straight lines, indicating that that's probably a grave, and then some of them are upraised like headstones in the area. And there's a grinding stone, which is buried with the women. So you can see the impression there, or the indentation used for the grinding, and then the stone that goes with it. And there's quite a few of those. There's quite a few women that were caught in the idolatry and the sexual immorality. That's, some of you may know author Joel Richardson. He writes some books on the last days and prophecy, and does quite a bit on Sinai. So he leads tours there. And John, didn't you say that you met him, or that you were on a tour with him, right? Yeah. So he popped up and said hi, because he was leading a group there. All right. So the split rock, this is more evidence. Before they reached Sinai, they came to Rephidim, And that's where they ran out of water, and they're complaining to Moses, and God told Moses to strike the rock. And when he did, it split, and water came out. So my vision of what this looked like was that, there's this boulder, maybe this big, and then Moses hit it with a rock, and then the stream of water came out. Okay? That is not a boulder. To give you scale of size, that's me at the bottom of it. What's interesting is that the length of the crack is the same length as the temple curtain, the tear in the temple curtain. It's like 60 feet. That's a 60-foot high rock with a split right down in the middle of it. And, well, I'll watch this. This also gives you scale.
We're at the split rock of Horeb. You can obviously see the split, and we're climbing up to it. Can give you a better scale of size by seeing the people in comparison with it.
What's interesting is that, okay, this is the view from the top of the split. This is all bedrock here. It's all red granite, okay? So all the topsoil has been washed away by a huge wave of water coming down. So there's the topsoil. That's what topsoil looks like in this area. It's like white or creamy. And this is all red because all the topsoil has been washed away. And it's directly down from the mountain. I mean, on the other sides of the mountain, they still have topsoil in it, but not in this area. And so all the water came rushing down this mountain and then came off to the side here and came around the side here and deposited all that topsoil in what must have been a lake right beyond in this area. But it just shows that there was a tremendous amount of water that came rushing down and washed all that topsoil away. So the water erosion with the split presents good evidence that that's the split rock. And that was magnificent seeing that thing, just how huge it is. I said that we had a Pentecostal preacher from Italy that joined us, and he told me that whenever we would sing, he never wanted to sing. He says, because I can't carry a tune. He says, except when I sing in the Spirit. He says, when I sing in the Spirit, I'm in perfect tune. So I filmed him singing in the Spirit.
No, he doesn't. You should choke me up.
I thought that was cool. Yeah, perfect pitch. All right, so then not far from that site, it said that Moses had a battle with the Amalekites, and this is where, as long as his hands were raised up, they won, and when the hands went down, they lost. So Aaron and Hur held up his hands, so we kind of reenacted it here. But on this site, there's a huge flat wadi plain, and there's two massive graveyards, one Muslim, one Jewish, at this site. And then there's this big hill right in the middle.
Okay, I'm at the site, the likely site of where Moses defeated the Amalekites. This is a raised hill in the middle of a vast wadi, and there's a stone in the middle. You can strategically see the whole battlefield. What also gives it credence is off in the distance is a large graveyard, and there's some modern Islam graves in there. And over here we have a large walled-off graveyard with no graves in it, thinking that the Israelites might be buried there, and that no Arab would want to be buried with a Jew. So we've got a large battlefield area, a raised mound that would offer easily escape in case of need of retreat, and two large ancient graveyards in a place that doesn't have a whole lot of people.
So again, do we have proof? No. We got a lot of good evidence, yes. And I mean, all these things are taking place near the area of Mount Sinai, just like the Bible said they did. Like this was one day's trip away to Mount Sinai that they went after they were here. So, and it was, like 2 or 3 miles from Mount Sinai that we find all these things. So this was the day we decided to climb Mount Sinai, and after I'd done Elijah's Cave, I had second thoughts. I knew I was going to be in pain from it, because Elijah's Cave was 2.5 hours up and 2.5 hours down, and this was going to be 4 hours up and 4 hours down. But I said, I didn't come this far to not do it, so I may die, but I'm going to do it. And my legs died. All right, so this is the narration about the site.
We're at the base of Mount Sinai, getting ready to climb, and our route will be first up through that valley, and then where you can see the black start, we head out along the ridge line there, up to the summit, which is up there, and actually it's behind there, and there's actually a higher spot there. But
see how it's all in black, though?
This is the hike of Mount Sinai, and it's projected to take all 8 hours.
It did. That's starting out. That was the fun part. Nice flat area. Quickly, we got to the ridge and started to climb. And again, that loose rock, again, making it just about impossible to get a good footing. This is about halfway up. You can kind of see the wadi down below there. This is about 2/3 of the way up, and we're starting to get into the black rock area. And this kind of explains that black rock. We are about 200 meters from the summit yet, and you can see that black sheen that's on the rocks. It's actually fairly common. It's called desert varnish, but this appears to be a little bit more shiny than desert varnish, and so it hasn't been tested. We don't know if the fire of God might have made it a little more shiny, but just the fact that it's shiny is not a sign that that there was fire up here. That's the basalt, the natural basalt on the top of the mountain, and experiencing somewhat of an oxidation process that gives it that real shiny effect. But it's true that the top 3 peaks of Mount Sinai, made up of 3 peaks, all have this real shiny desert varnish on it that may have been enhanced by the presence of God. We don't know, but I think it is. Okay, so the thing that's kind of distinct about it, you can see that the top of the rock is black, and the bottom part is like red or tan. So it's like there's a clear black coating on the top of this rock. And I did bring some. I'll pass it around. I don't know if you can see it in the dark, but so you have a rock like this. This is shiny all around, but like this one, you can kind of clearly see that it's red, which is one of the colors of basalt. But then the top, very top layer is a shiny black. So I'll pass those around. Try explaining that to the Jordanian police when you're trying to go through security. Why you have black rocks. I just like to collect rocks. And made it to the top. 4 hours. Legs were dead, but spirit was alive. You can see that's the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba out there, and then the mountains of Egypt on the other side. But I mean, you could see quite a ways from the summit. So that was the view looking out west. You saw that. And this was more on the desert varnish.
Up at the top of Mount Sinai, you can't help but notice at the peak here
I was a little
how
out
the
of
rocks
breath.
have been split, and they all have that desert varnish. But I think it's a special anointed desert varnish. It's been caused here by the presence of the Lord. It's just awesome to think that here's where God met with Moses and spoke with him. It's an inspiring spot.
And we spent at least an hour at the top recovering before we started back down. And the same loose rock again. And that was 4 hours later. I was the last one down by quite a bit, but I made it down and lived to tell. People ask about wildlife in the area. You see quite a few camels grazing next to the road, but they're not wild. They actually belong to people. So every one of those camels belongs to somebody, and they know who they are. But that was quite a common sight, was to see camels. This was my restroom in my hotel, which, if you notice, the shower is very close to the toilet bowl. So taking a shower was a bit of a challenge, and positioning yourself. I'd never seen that before. I think they were trying to save space, but I thought that was interesting. All right, so now we're coming to the Jordan part of the trip, leaving Saudi Arabia. We picked up we lost all the people. We were back down to just one person and myself, Janet and myself. And then we picked up this, his name is Mosla, and he's a Saudi government official who is a Muslim, but believes in where the site of Mount Sinai is, and he has his own YouTube channel. It's in Arabic, but he's a little controversial in Saudi Arabia because he's promoting the biblical version of where Mount Sinai is and Moses. Turns out the Quran has a very similar version because they also believe in Moses and Mount Sinai. They have their own version, but it's pretty close to the Bible version of that. So he was going and filming some of the locations in Jordan that are mentioned in the Bible that he also believes are authentic. Oh, Andrew was able to rejoin us. He got his fine paid, but the problem wasn't in Jordan, it was in Saudi, so he could have joined us anyway. So when he came, he was supposed to meet us in Aqaba, which is right at the point of the Red Sea. And so he was supposed to fly back from the capital of Amman and join us in Aqaba. Well, that was the night the missiles came. So all air traffic was grounded. So he drove back, it was a 2-hour drive from the capital of Amman to Aqaba, which was like a 2-hour drive. And later I'll show you the video clips of that because the missiles were flying over as he was driving back. But we went to the city of Petra, which is an amazing place. It's not really mentioned in the Bible, other than the fact that the king of Petra, which was the Nabateans, his daughter married Herod Antipas, I think. Antipas. It was the one that divorced or left his wife and married Herodias, and ended up killing John the Baptist because the daughter danced for him. It was that one. So it was Herodias was the one that he married. That was his brother's wife, and John the Baptist said, "You're not supposed to do that." But he left the daughter of Petra, of the king of Petra. So the king of Petra went to war with him and beat him. Cost him a lot of money for doing that. But that's a tie-in. Other than that, in Jordan, they dealt a lot with frankincense and myrrh, and so I brought some of that too, so you can smell what that's like. But Petra's an interesting place. That was the one that they used in the Indiana Jones movie. Remember that scene? So, all right. So this is a church that was built around Lot's cave. When the fire came and destroyed Sodom, it said that God allowed him to flee to Zoar, which is a small town. Now, Zoar wasn't destroyed, but Lot eventually didn't. He moved out of Zoar and lived in a cave. So this is a cave on the mountain that overlooks Zoar, and apparently people visited it for centuries. It shows evidence of being visited for centuries, and this is the church that was there. But there was no gift shop.
I'm here filming at Lot's Cave, which this part was a Byzantine church of the 6th or 7th century that was built to honor and preserve what was believed then to be Lot's Cave behind me here. And when they took it down, or were excavating it, they found this special entranceway in a wall that was protecting a cave. And going into the cave, which even from the 1st century and before, they believed this was Lot's cave because it's nearby the city of Zoar, where Lot fled to, and then later said he left and lived in this cave with his 2 daughters. And when they excavated this cave, they found pottery that dated all the way back to the Bronze Age, which would have been the time of Lot. So it gives credence to the belief that Lot indeed lived in this cave for a while, which was venerated later by the Jews, then the Christians, and even the Muslims.
So there's pretty good evidence that is Lot's cave, just based on the fact that it had been visited and it was like a holy site for the Jews for a long time. So that would have been like over 1,000 years that they would have visited that. So nearby is what they believe is the remains of Sodom. And what's interesting about this area is that this strata right here is all ash, just pure ash. And where did all the ash come from? And embedded in the ash are these sulfur balls. These are rock balls of pure sulfur. Sulfur usually only comes in concentrations of like 50, 60%, and it's yellow. This is pure sulfur, and it's like 95% pure sulfur. And so we went into this area, and I was digging these out of the ash, and then security came by because the missiles had just flown over the day before, and so they were a little nervous about people, and this is near the border because it's near the Dead Sea, so they were nervous about people being in the border areas when missiles are flying over. So I only had about 15 minutes to gather these sulfur balls, but they are flammable. So I got one here. I'll demonstrate. They don't explode, but they are flammable. So yeah, rocks don't burn. And I have I brought the case so you can see that, but I wanted to pass this around. Don't inhale deeply. So can you see there's like a blue flame? That's, what? Well, you want to see oh, there we inhaled. Yeah, you can pass it around, just don't drop it. Yeah, it's a blue flame. But that's what would have rained down. I mean, this is a little tiny ball. Imagine hail or a sky full of this stuff falling down. I mean, it would have been horrible. And I mean, it calls brimstone hellfire. So, and the lake of fire is brimstone. So imagine a lake of fire with this stuff in it. And then, so I'll pass. This is the container with it. Again, don't take a deep breath. I did. I wanted to look down at it, and I caught a full breath of it. I was coughing for 15 minutes, and I'm just coughing now. So, that's what brimstone is. Just pure sulfur that rained down, and they think this fell in a lake or water area and was extinguished, and the ash settled on top of it. And so now you can go to certain locations and get your own personal brimstone. I'll pass this around too. These were fossils that we got from Noah's Ark area. So they're up, it's a little unusual to have a sea up 5,500 feet, but that's where these fossils came from, was up 5,500 feet. Oh wait, I forgot to get the water. Well, sort of. I mean, if it was salt, it would have dissolved long ago. But there's this rock formation that they call Lot's Wife, and it just kind of stands out, but it's rock. It's not salt. But they call it, can you put it in the sink down there? Ooh, ooh. Those fumes are toxic, by the way. I mean, you don't want to sit there and breathe them. I'm trying to spare you. But that was one of the goals of my trip, was to get some sulfur balls. So I knew that they were there, and our guide knew where they were at. So he led us to the right location. But then security jumped in and said, you're a little too close to the border. All right, so this is Andrew's explanation.
We are here along the Dead Sea on the Jordanian side and looking at some of the samples of brimstone or sulfur nodules that our group picked up today. Now, these sulfur balls are almost 100% pure sulfur, and they're found what they call the Lasan formations. And these are this white gypsum material that looks like ash, and you'll find these sulfur embedded in there. Now, today we didn't find as many as we usually did in the past, but you can see them right here. We actually burned one of these, and they're flammable, and it produces a very toxic smell and a blue flame. It's really hot. You can imagine in the Bible where it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed by fire and brimstone, that basically this sulfur was fuel for the fire, and God was raining this on the 5 cities of the plain and on the plain itself, and it says it was total destruction. So the next morning when Abraham looked down towards Sodom, it said he saw the smoke of a great furnace, even the next morning. So this is evidence, we believe, of the destructive fire and the brimstone that God rained down on the cities. And now if you look in the biblical account, it also talks about hellfire being brimstone and fire. So this is divine fire that destroyed those cities.
And that's what I'm passing around, except I had this rock here, but I took it to the jail so the inmates could see it, and I was passing it around. But I forgot to tell them it's real flaky, fragile. So they dropped it. So some of the fragments we were burning were from this rock here, which we no longer have. So I'm keeping the balls in the container so that we don't destroy more of them. All right, so then coming near the end, we went to Mount Nebo, which is where God took Moses so that he could look across and see the promised land, but he wasn't allowed to go in. So that's at the top of Mount Nebo, and you really can see a long distance. Now, it's pretty hazy in Israel now, so you can't see all the way that as far as Moses could see, but you can still see a long way from up there. All right, this is where John baptized Jesus. Now, sort of. This is the Jordan River, and you can see why Naaman did not want to wash in the Jordan River. I mean, people are coming down with water containers, to gather water, and then they'd look at it. It's all muddy and pooey, and then they just dump it out. So we were actually there. Sue and I were here on the Israeli side of the Jordan River last year, and you could, for a small fee of $15 at the gift shop, buy a gown and get baptized in the Jordan River, which about 4 or 5 of our group did. So on the Jordanian side, well, there is a gift shop, and you can go down that, there's like a ramp there and get baptized there. But actually, we think that's not the exact site where Jesus got baptized. He did get baptized on the Jordan side because it said that he was baptized near Bethany, east of the Jordan. And so east of the Jordan is on the Jordan side. It's on this side. This is east. And that Bethany was actually like a small spot. So here's the place that we think Jesus actually got baptized by John, because there's like a tributary here that comes off of the Jordan River when it was higher, and the Jordan River was much higher than it is now, but that this was like a tributary that came off and formed a pool right here that would have been relatively calm water and a good spot to baptize, and it's only maybe 500 yards from the Jordan River. So more than likely, this was the spot where Jesus was baptized by John. All right, so I mentioned that when Andrew, he was coming from Amman, the capital of Jordan, which is where the J is there, where we were staying is right where the Gulf of Aqaba came up at Aqaba. That was the name of the town. So that night is, as he was going to fly back, that's when the missiles started coming over. So Iran is here, and they fired drones and missiles and cruise missiles that came across Iraq and came across Jordan. As they came across Jordan, that's when Jordan released their anti-missiles. They have a version of the Iron Dome, as you will. But also Saudi Arabia got in the act. It's like everybody knew they were coming, and they picked them up on the radar when they were way over here. And so by the time they got to Jordan, they were waiting for them. They were sitting around waiting for the missiles to come. The Jordanian army was. And it was basically a turkey shoot because Iran did not fire their best missiles. It was like they had spring cleaning and got rid of all the old missiles. Now, as you know, the story behind it was that Israel sent cruise missiles over to Iran and bombed one of their meeting places of Hamas's generals, and they took out like 7 generals with a strike. And so Iran had to save face. They had to respond, so they got all their old missiles and their slow-flying drones and fired those. So on paper, it looks pretty impressive that they fired 170 drones, 120 surface-to-surface missiles, and 30 cruise missiles. They were older, but it says that 99% they were intercepted by Israeli, American, British, French, and Jordanian military units, and the Saudis also got involved. So as they're coming over, everyone was just taking pot shots at them and just knocking them out of the sky, so that only 1% actually even reached the Israel border, and Israel eliminated them quite quickly. Actually, they were firing their missiles into Jordan and intercepting them before they even got to the border. So like I said, my guide, Andrew, was driving back, and as he's driving back, this is what he saw.
Maybe.
Hey, look.
There it goes. I don't know.
Where's the second one?
Oh, the whole bunch.
No way.
Oh,
So the missiles coming from this direction are Israel or Jordan. The ones coming this way
Oh, those 3 are going
Iran.
to Israel.
Yeah.
And if you see a bright red fire, that's them exploding, getting hit by something. So you'll see all these little white dots exploding.
Wow, look at that one. Oh, it blew up. Oh, it fell apart. There's more up there, look. Oh, sorry, over there.
Whoa.
Yeah.
this is the second video he took. And
There
again,
it goes. Who's going to hit that one? Those are the Iranian drones.
that's coming from Israel.
It's all in a row coming from Iran.
These are coming from
I
Iran.
might as well get out, I guess.
And they're flaming out.
Whoa! That was a big one. Here, let's get out. Oh, there's a whole bunch.
Oh my god.
Maybe we should drive farther away. This is right above us.
Definitely, that's safe.
They all flamed out. They all got hit. So he got the fun part while I was sleeping. But that's kind of an act. And then what was funny is that after they fired all they sent them with Allah will guide them, okay? Didn't do a very good job of guiding them. That after all these missiles were destroyed and not a single one hit its target, they kind of wiped their hands and said, "Mission accomplished." So remember they said, "Well, we're finished. We won't do anything more." So they had to save face, so they had to fire something, but it wasn't very impressive, and it was dealt with very quickly. The one thing that we did notice, or that was a pain, was that when Israel is threatened or under attack, they jam all the GPS signals. So we were using Google Maps to get to places, but Google Maps was putting us in Cairo, 600 miles away. So they jam all the GPS signals, so you can't use your phone, your GPS. You can't use Google Maps because it's putting you somewhere else. Fortunately for us, Andrew knew where all the sites were. He remembered them and how to get there. So it didn't keep us from visiting anything, but it was just kind of a nuisance that we could really never tell where we were at during that time. So that was a trip. It was a lot of fun. Any questions? They won't for long. I mean, yeah, well, right now, all these things are in areas that they're remote. Okay, most of these areas were remote. So, I've got, obviously, soil samples and stuff from, I've got soil from Noah's Ark there. And then after I got a little bit, I thought, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm excavating. And they're not going to like that I'm just digging away. But like the beach sands at Nueva, that big beach area, I got some sands from there. I actually got a marble chip, that little small one there is from the Temple of Diana, the seventh wonder of the world that just has the one column left. So I got a chip from that. That's probably why there's not much left there, yeah. Just took a little chip. Any other questions? Noah's Ark, did you actually walk down to the... Yeah, you can walk down to where the big shape is and actually walk the length and even walk on the sides and see the ribs that are on the sides. So it's very accessible. The visitor center is on a hill just above it, and you just walk down to it. The only problem is it's really muddy. I mean, it's all mud, but it was very accessible. So you can, and they have somebody at the visitor center all the time. Bring money for a tip. You got to tip everybody there. But they have somebody manning the visitor center, and he'll give you a tour. And so, yeah, it's very accessible. My shoes got money. Yeah. I was not well prepared for the weather or the terrain for that area. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, safe enough where you could go by yourself. In fact, the gal that was with me, Janet, she had already been to most of these areas, and she just rents a car and drives there. So she goes by herself. So yeah, Egypt was I was a little uneasy in Egypt. Good. It's Mediterranean cuisine, so it's very healthy. I had camel kebab. Why not? It's there. But I mean, there's a lot of shish kebab type stuff, rice, a lot of Greek dishes, but very healthy. Except that, and I should have included a picture. In Turkey, everybody smokes. It's part of the culture. So there's no such thing as no smoking spots in Turkey. Everywhere, every restaurant you go, at the end of the meal, you're going to get a glass of tea from the compliments of the house, and you're going to pull out your cigarettes and smoke. So that's the normal meal, is to end with tea and cigarettes. Even the Christians smoke. It's just part of their culture. So they're paying for it, but yeah. They just chiseled it. Yeah. So they chisel, like, if there's this huge block, they just chisel off the front part of the block, the smooth part, haul that away, and then stack them up and use them for their houses. So these historians that have seen the pyramids before they got stripped said it looked like it was gold glistening in the sun. It looked like pure gold before they were destroyed. Pardon? The what? Oh, myrrh. No, that I bought in a store. Jordan is known for its frankincense. The myrrh comes from Oman. But, I mean, if you want to take a couple, I've got some little containers you can if you burn that, you're not going to cough. That smells really good when you burn myrrh. Yeah. Except it's not flammable, so you got to get like a charcoal coal, heat it up, and then put it on top of the charcoal. But it really has a fragrant smell. Yeah, Joe? Yeah. Can you show the example here? How big is the church? Well, it's 500 feet long. What do you think we got here? About, I'd say, 200 feet wide, so. This would probably be one of the rooms. Yeah, football field and a half. Okay, so football field is 300 feet, so another half of that. So like 1.5 or 1 2/3 football fields long, and probably about a football field wide. I mean, when you're walking on top of it, you're just like, oh my goodness, this is huge. Well, if you've been to the Ark in Louisiana, or Louisville, Kentucky, that I went to that, so it'd be very similar to that. That's the exact dimensions. It may not have been structured like that, but very similar to that. Although, interestingly enough, the Ark does not recognize the real Ark as being the Ark. They think they need more evidence. So, and they've come out and made some videos disputing the fact that that's the Ark. They don't think it's the Ark, because one of the scientists on Ron Wyatt's team that did the measurements later recanted or said, no, that's not really what it says it is. And so they kind of, there's always arguments and disputes. So there was on his team too, and they've picked up on that and said, well, yeah, he must be right. But there's just so much, all the scans, all the maps, the location, the size, it's just, to me, it's just overwhelming evidence that the Ark is there. So. A couple. Noah's Ark was one. Just see the size of that thing. Split Rock was really cool. And then Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai was both the best day and the worst day. Best day is I made it. Worst day is I made it and paid the price for it. Yeah, my legs were still sore about a week and a half later. I was still hurting from that. So, I mean, everything was cool. It was one of those few trips where everything was good. It didn't disappoint at all. And I mean, if you're interested in any of that, you can go to their website because he offers tours. And like I said, most people did the Sinai tour because there's more stuff there. But you can just buy one portion of the tour and, go for just whatever portion you want. I wanted to see it all, so I just went hog wild. And did not disappoint at all. Yeah.
Were you able to see the white marble quarry?
No, because I'm too old. I made it to Elijah's cave, and then the quarry is at the top. You continue up to the top, and on a ridge up there is the quarry.
On the cave mount?
Yes, on the cave mount. So it's on Mount Sinai. Just a part of it is a old marble quarry. I made it to the cave and said, I'm not going any farther.
The next day when you climbed the hatch.
Well, it wasn't the next day. They gave us like 3 days rest from Elijah's cave. So there's 3 days that we could rest our legs. And then we did Mount Sinai.
But from that, you couldn't see the quarry.
No, you had to kind of go behind the cave and then up to the top. So, but yeah, it's there. I mean, the younger half of our group went there, and then they also went to the plateau where Moses met with the elders, which is also up there. So there was like a plateau area that Moses met with the elders. That's also there. So I mean, there's so many of these things that are mentioned about Mount Sinai. You just check them off. They're all there. And then to go to where they said the traditional site is, nothing matches there. I mean, there's not a golden calf altar, there's not a graveyard, there's not a riverbed, there's not enough space to put 100,000 people, much less 1 million people. So it's just like, so. Yeah. Go. Unless, Frank, can you? Actually, it's toward the beginning, where the white map is, like the 10th or 11th slide or something. It's basically discoverededsinai.com. And then if you want to, well, actually, what did I do with it? Yeah. I don't know, it's that white map. Yeah, Andrew. So the videos that I watched in researching it, these are the ones that go over Ron Wyatt's discoveries in more detail. The 4 areas, and some other ones that are also not confirmed. And we'll have this in the church's library, but this was really interesting watching more information about each one of these sites. That kind of convinced me. And it was interesting, I finished watching these and I said, man, if there would just be somebody that would organize a tour to go to all these sites, and like the next day I found Discovered Sinai, and it offered every one of the sites that was on here that I wanted to see. And I said, I don't care what it costs, I'm going. Because I was just so excited. Had a little discussion with my wife about it, but I went, cashed in the retirement plan. It was worth every penny. Yeah, all that to bring back a sulfur ball. Huh? there's so much money invested in there, and it's on all the maps, and they're still denying it. They still think, they said that, because it says, Moses went to the land of Midian, and they know where Midian is. It's in Saudi Arabia, but they say, well, at that time, Midian expanded their kingdom and were in the Sinai Peninsula. So, they're not going to admit, yes. So they're not going to admit that they're wrong. So, okay, you stayed awake. I'll stick around, answer any questions, and you can look at the rock samples that made it through Jordanian security. I just said I like to collect rocks, and they didn't. Normally they take it and dump it out, but